God's message of hope, a story about new beginnings and healing. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay until the very end, because this is not a prediction or a promise about your future. It is a fictional, faith-inspired story about hope, healing, forgiveness, and the quiet ways love can grow when hearts are transformed. Sometimes we spend so much time looking for dramatic signs that we forget how powerful ordinary moments can be. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not that circumstances change overnight, but that a heart learns to let go of fear and welcome peace. If you've ever wondered whether broken chapters can become beautiful endings, this story is for you. The morning began like countless others. The sun slowly rose above the hills, painting the sky with soft shades of gold and amber. Birds welcomed the new day with gentle songs while cool air carried the scent of fresh rain across the fields. Somewhere in that peaceful morning, two people who had walked through very different journeys were beginning a new chapter, not because every problem had disappeared, but because both had quietly decided that yesterday would no longer define tomorrow. One of them had spent years carrying regret like a heavy backpack. Every mistake felt impossible to forget. Every disappointment became another reason to doubt that life could ever become beautiful again. Yet little by little, through prayer, reflection, honest conversations, and the encouragement of people who truly cared, their heart began to change. They discovered that healing rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It grows through daily choices to forgive, to learn, to take responsibility, and to keep moving forward with hope. Listen carefully, because this changes everything. During a quiet walk through a nearby park, they noticed an elderly gardener carefully planting tiny seeds into the soil. Curious, they asked, "How can you spend so much time planting when nothing is blooming yet?" The gardener smiled warmly and replied, "Because I don't plant based on what I see today. I plant based on what I believe can grow tomorrow." Those simple words stayed with them long after the conversation ended. They realized that hope works the same way. It invites us to keep planting kindness, patience, and faith even when the results are not yet visible. Days turned into weeks, and something unexpected happened. Instead of chasing certainty, they began embracing gratitude. Instead of asking, "Why hasn't everything changed?" they began asking, "What small blessing can I appreciate today?" They noticed laughter returning more easily. They smiled more often. They became more patient with themselves and with others. The peace they had been searching for wasn't arriving from outside circumstances, it was quietly growing within. Stay until the very end, because the most beautiful chapter was still ahead. One afternoon they met an old friend they hadn't seen in years. After talking for a while, the friend smiled and said, "You seem different." They laughed softly and asked, "Different how?" The answer came without hesitation. "Lighter. More peaceful. Like someone who finally stopped carrying a burden they were never meant to carry forever." Those words brought unexpected tears, because they realized real transformation isn't always obvious to us, but others often notice it before we do. As the seasons changed, new opportunities quietly appeared. Doors that once seemed closed slowly opened. New friendships formed. Old misunderstandings found healing through honest conversations. They discovered that life doesn't always erase painful memories, but it can give those memories a new purpose. Instead of becoming chains that hold us back, they can become reminders of how much we've grown. One evening, standing beneath a sky filled with countless stars, they whispered a simple prayer of gratitude, not because every question had been answered, but because they had learned to trust the journey one step at a time. Looking toward the horizon, they smiled with quiet confidence. A new beginning had never required a perfect past. It had only required a willing heart ready to grow, to forgive, and to walk forward with hope. And perhaps that is the greatest message this story offers: every sunrise is an invitation to begin again. No matter how difficult yesterday may have been, kindness can be chosen again. Hope can be embraced again. Trust can be rebuilt wisely. Love can grow through honesty and patience. The future is not written by fear alone. It is shaped by the choices we make today. Sometimes the most extraordinary new beginning starts with one ordinary step taken in faith, compassion, and courage. The next morning arrived with a gentle stillness that seemed to settle over everything. Sunlight filtered through the trees, painting the path ahead with warm golden light as if inviting every weary heart to keep moving forward. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay until the very end, because the most meaningful chapter is only beginning. There are seasons when nothing appears to be changing on the outside, yet beneath the surface, countless quiet miracles are taking place within the heart. Growth often happens in silence. Healing is rarely announced. The strongest transformations begin long before anyone else can see them. The person in this story continued their journey one faithful step at a time. They no longer measured each day by dramatic signs or extraordinary events. Instead, they learned to recognize the beauty hidden in ordinary moments: a kind conversation with a stranger, a peaceful walk beneath an open sky, the comfort of sincere prayer, and the quiet strength that comes from choosing forgiveness over bitterness. They discovered that hope becomes stronger every time it is practiced, even when the future remains uncertain. What once felt like waiting slowly became preparation. Listen carefully, because this changes everything. One afternoon they received an invitation to help organize a community gathering at a small neighborhood center. At first it seemed like an ordinary request, but they accepted with a grateful heart. Throughout the day they met people from many different walks of life, each carrying unseen burdens and untold stories. Some had experienced loss, others were rebuilding after disappointment, while many simply needed someone willing to listen without judgment. As conversation after conversation unfolded, they realized something profound. Every person they met was searching for the same thing: a reason to believe that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. As the gathering came to an end, an elderly woman approached with a gentle smile. She quietly said, "Never underestimate what a peaceful heart can do. Sometimes your greatest purpose isn't to solve someone's problems. It's simply to remind them they don't have to face them alone." Those words settled deeply within them. They understood that healing is contagious. One hopeful heart can inspire another, and another after that, creating a ripple of compassion that reaches far beyond what anyone can measure. Stay until the very end, because something beautiful was quietly unfolding. That evening, while walking home beneath a sky filled with brilliant stars, they reflected on how different life had become. The questions that once kept them awake every night had slowly lost their grip. They no longer felt trapped by yesterday's regrets or overwhelmed by tomorrow's uncertainties. Instead, they had learned to treasure the gift of today. Gratitude had become stronger than fear. Peace had become louder than worry. Faith had become steadier than doubt. The following weekend they returned to the small park where they had once met the elderly gardener planting tiny seeds. This time the flower beds were alive with vibrant colors. Butterflies drifted gently from blossom to blossom while children laughed nearby. The gardener recognized them immediately and smiled. "You came back," he said warmly. They nodded with quiet joy. Looking across the blooming garden, they finally understood what he had meant all those weeks before. The seeds had needed time beneath the soil before anyone could admire the flowers. Hearts often grow the same way. What is patiently nurtured in hidden places eventually becomes visible for everyone to see. Something huge was waiting in this story, not because of a dramatic event, but because of a quiet realization. Standing there among the flowers, they finally understood that every difficult season had been preparing them for this one. Every disappointment had taught compassion. Every delay had built patience. Every unanswered question had strengthened trust. The road had not been easy, but it had shaped them into someone capable of encouraging others with genuine understanding instead of empty words. As the sun slowly began setting beyond the hills, they whispered another simple prayer of gratitude. Not because life had become perfect, but because they had discovered something even more valuable. They had found peace that remained steady through changing circumstances. They had found joy rooted in gratitude rather than possessions. And they had found hope that continued shining even when they couldn't yet see the entire path ahead. Walking home beneath the evening sky, they smiled quietly, unaware that another meaningful chapter was already waiting just beyond tomorrow's sunrise. It would not arrive with fear or confusion. It would arrive with an unexpected conversation, a surprising opportunity to encourage another heart, and a reminder that every new beginning starts with one faithful step. The story was far from over. In many ways, it was only just beginning. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay until the very end, because every season of waiting prepares the heart for something it could not have understood before. This is still a fictional, faith-inspired story, but its greatest lesson is one that echoes through every generation. Hope often grows quietly before it is seen openly. The person in this story woke before sunrise and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The world was peaceful. Dew rested on the grass, birds welcomed the dawn with gentle songs, and a soft breeze carried the fragrance of blooming flowers across the countryside. Looking at the horizon, they realized that even after the darkest night, the sun had never once forgotten to rise. That simple truth became a reminder that difficult seasons are never the whole story. The weeks that followed were filled with ordinary days, yet those ordinary days slowly transformed everything. They began volunteering at the local community garden, helping children plant flowers, sharing meals with neighbors, and listening to people whose stories had long gone unheard. At first they believed they were simply offering kindness to others. Gradually they discovered something unexpected. Every encouraging word they gave away somehow returned to strengthen their own heart. Every act of compassion softened wounds they hadn't realized were still healing. They learned that serving others has a remarkable way of reminding us that our lives carry purpose beyond our own circumstances. Listen carefully, because this changes everything. One afternoon, while watering young plants beneath the warm sunlight, a little girl approached carrying a tiny seed in her hand. She smiled brightly and asked, "Do you think something this small can really become something beautiful?" They knelt beside her, gently covering the seed with soil before answering, "Yes, but it needs patience, care, and time." As the little girl skipped away happily, those words echoed back into their own heart. They realized they had unknowingly answered the question they had been asking themselves for months. Growth is rarely instant. The most meaningful changes often begin where no one else can see them. As another season quietly arrived, they noticed the community around them changing as well. Friendships deepened. Families found reasons to laugh again. Old disagreements slowly gave way to understanding. The garden that had once been bare now overflowed with vibrant colors. Butterflies danced between blossoms while children proudly pointed to flowers they had helped plant. Standing there, they understood that every seed carries within it the possibility of a future no one can fully imagine. Hope works the same way. Even when hidden beneath the surface, it continues growing. Stay until the very end, because the next chapter revealed something even more meaningful. During a peaceful evening gathering, an elderly neighbor shared a story from many years ago. "When I was young," he said, "I believed life's greatest blessings arrived all at once. Now I know they usually arrive one faithful day at a time." Those words settled over everyone present like a gentle breeze. The person in this story smiled quietly, realizing that their own life had become proof of that wisdom. Nothing extraordinary had happened overnight. Yet countless ordinary moments had gradually shaped an extraordinary transformation within. That night, under a sky filled with brilliant stars, they offered another quiet prayer of gratitude. Not because every question had been answered, but because they had found peace while still walking the journey. They no longer needed certainty to continue moving forward. They had learned that faith often means taking the next step even when the entire path remains unseen. Looking upward, they whispered, "Thank you for teaching me that every sunrise is another invitation to choose hope, kindness, and courage." As they walked home beneath the moonlight, they couldn't help smiling. The road ahead was still unfolding, but it no longer frightened them. They understood that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to encourage another heart, forgive another mistake, celebrate another small blessing, and continue growing into the person they were created to become. And somewhere just beyond the next sunrise, another gentle chapter was already waiting, not one filled with dramatic signs, but one filled with quiet moments that would reveal how powerful a hopeful heart can truly become. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay until the very end, because every page of this fictional, faith-inspired story has been quietly leading to a moment of unexpected joy. There are seasons when it seems as though nothing is changing, yet beneath the surface, the heart is being prepared for blessings that cannot be rushed. Just as the roots of a great tree grow deep before its branches reach toward the sky, hope often becomes strongest long before its fruit can be seen. The person in this story had begun to understand that every prayer, every act of kindness, every difficult lesson, and every patient day had become part of something far greater than they had imagined. One peaceful morning, they returned to the community garden just after sunrise. The flowers were covered with tiny drops of dew that sparkled like jewels in the soft morning light. Children laughed as they chased butterflies along the winding paths, while volunteers carefully watered young plants that had only recently begun to bloom. Watching this simple scene, they realized that beauty often grows quietly, unnoticed by those who expect only dramatic moments. The gardener they had met months before smiled warmly and said, "Do you remember when these flower beds were empty?" They nodded. "Now look at them," the gardener continued. "Nothing happened overnight. Every blossom you see is the result of many ordinary days of faithful care." Those words settled deeply within them, reminding them once again that lasting change is rarely sudden. Listen carefully, because this changes everything. Later that afternoon, while helping clean the small community hall after another neighborhood gathering, they found an old wooden box tucked beneath a shelf. Inside were handwritten notes left by visitors over many years. Some expressed gratitude for kindness they had received. Others shared stories of forgiveness, restored friendships, and quiet moments of hope discovered during difficult seasons. One note in particular caught their attention. It simply read, "The greatest gift someone gave me was not perfect advice. It was their willingness to stay beside me until I found hope again." They read those words several times before gently placing the note back inside the box. At that moment, they understood that love is often revealed through faithful presence rather than extraordinary speeches. As the weeks continued, they found themselves encouraging people almost without realizing it. A neighbor struggling with loneliness stopped by for tea. A young student asked for advice before an important exam. A family facing unexpected hardship found comfort in simple conversations and shared meals. None of these moments seemed remarkable on their own, yet together they formed a beautiful picture of a life becoming a source of light for others. Looking back, they smiled with quiet amazement. There had been a time when they believed they had nothing valuable to offer anyone. Now they saw that every challenge they had overcome had given them compassion they could freely share. Stay until the very end, because the most meaningful realization had not yet arrived. One evening, as golden sunlight slowly disappeared beyond the hills, they sat alone beneath a large oak tree overlooking the peaceful valley. The same journal that had once been filled with questions now contained page after page of gratitude. Turning slowly through its chapters, they noticed something they had never seen before. The earliest entries focused almost entirely on what they wished would change. The newest entries spoke instead about what they had already received. Peace, wisdom, friendships, courage, patience, and a heart no longer controlled by fear. Without noticing when it happened, they had become the answer to many of the prayers they had once whispered in loneliness. A gentle breeze moved through the trees as the first stars appeared overhead. They quietly closed the journal and looked toward the horizon. They no longer searched for dramatic signs to reassure them that life was moving forward. They had learned to recognize quiet blessings hidden within ordinary days. Every sunrise had become a reminder of fresh mercy. Every conversation carried an opportunity to encourage someone. Every challenge became another invitation to grow in wisdom instead of giving in to despair. As they began walking home beneath the peaceful evening sky, they realized something that filled their heart with deep gratitude. New beginnings are not always marked by loud celebrations or extraordinary events. Sometimes they begin with one honest prayer, one forgiving conversation, one act of kindness, one faithful step, and one heart willing to trust that even in seasons of waiting, good things can still grow. Smiling gently, they continued down the quiet path, unaware that another beautiful chapter was waiting just beyond tomorrow's sunrise, a chapter that would remind them once again that hope shared with others never grows smaller. It only grows brighter. A new beginning filled with hope. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay until the very end, because every chapter of this fictional, faith-inspired story has been leading to this beautiful moment. There are seasons when life feels quiet, when prayers seem to disappear into the silence, and when the road ahead is hidden beyond the horizon. Yet sometimes it is in those very seasons that our hearts are being prepared for the greatest transformation. Looking back, the person in this story realized that every difficult day, every unanswered question, every moment of waiting, and every act of quiet faith had become part of a journey that shaped them into someone stronger, wiser, kinder, and more compassionate than they had ever imagined. As another spring arrived, the community garden was overflowing with color. Flowers that had once existed only as tiny seeds now stretched toward the sunlight in brilliant shades of red, blue, yellow, and white. Children laughed as butterflies floated through the warm afternoon air, families gathered beneath the trees, and neighbors greeted one another with genuine smiles. Standing among the blossoms, the person quietly remembered the day they had first questioned whether anything beautiful could ever grow from such small beginnings. Now the answer surrounded them in every direction. Growth had not happened all at once. It had happened one faithful day at a time. Listen carefully, because this changes everything. The elderly gardener, now walking a little more slowly than before, smiled warmly as he joined them beneath the old oak tree. Looking across the garden, he said, "People often admire the flowers, but they rarely think about the months when nothing could be seen above the soil. Those hidden months were just as important as the blooming season." The person smiled with grateful understanding. Their own life had followed the same pattern. The quiet seasons had never been wasted. They had been preparing roots strong enough to support everything that would come next. That evening the entire community gathered to celebrate another successful year of caring for the garden together. There were songs, shared meals, stories filled with laughter, and moments of heartfelt gratitude. As the celebration continued, several people stood to thank those who had encouraged them through difficult times. To their surprise, many of those words were directed toward the person whose journey had begun with so much uncertainty. One family thanked them for offering hope during a season of grief. A young student shared how their encouragement had restored confidence before an important opportunity. An elderly neighbor smiled and simply said, "Your kindness reminded me that no one has to walk through difficult days alone." Hearing those stories brought quiet tears to their eyes. They had once believed their greatest purpose was to search endlessly for answers about their own future. Instead, they discovered that one of life's greatest blessings is becoming a source of hope for someone else. Every difficult chapter they had lived through had given them the compassion to comfort another heart. Every lesson they had learned became a light they could share with those still finding their way. Stay until the very end, because the final lesson was the most meaningful of all. As the celebration came to a close, everyone released small lanterns into the evening sky. One by one they rose gently above the trees until they looked like stars floating toward the heavens. Watching them drift peacefully upward, the person whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, not because life had become perfect, but because they had learned that peace is not found in having every answer. Peace is found in walking each day with hope, gratitude, integrity, and a heart willing to love others well. Returning home that evening, they opened the journal that had traveled beside them throughout the entire journey. Turning to the very last page, they carefully wrote these words. Today I understand that new beginnings are not gifts reserved for a lucky few. They are invitations offered every morning. Yesterday taught me wisdom. Today's kindness gives me purpose. Tomorrow invites me to keep growing. I cannot change every chapter behind me, but I can choose how the next chapter will be written. Hope grows where gratitude is planted. Love grows where honesty is practiced. Peace grows where forgiveness is welcomed. Every sunrise is another opportunity to begin again. They gently closed the journal and placed it beside the window. Outside, the first light of a brand new morning slowly appeared across the horizon. Birds welcomed the dawn with joyful songs, the breeze carried the fresh scent of blooming flowers, and golden sunlight filled the room. Smiling quietly, they stepped outside with confidence, knowing that the future would still include challenges, surprises, and moments of uncertainty, but it would also include countless opportunities to choose kindness over anger, courage over fear, faith over despair, and hope over discouragement. As they walked along the familiar garden path one final time, they looked back with gratitude instead of regret. Every step, every conversation, every season of waiting, and every act of compassion had become part of a beautiful story that was never really about finding a perfect ending. It was about becoming the kind of person who could bring light into the lives of others. And so this fictional, faith-inspired story comes to a gentle close with one timeless reminder. Every sunrise is a new beginning. Every act of kindness plants a seed. Every honest heart has the power to change someone's life. And hope, when shared with others, never grows smaller, it grows brighter.